Good morning. Today we are going to take some notes. If I can get my screen to open up the right way. Okay, so our notes today are on the topic of algebra terms and how do we identify the different parts of an expression. Your essential question, like I said, is how do we identify the different parts of an expression? This is actually a bit of review. We went over this before, but I just want to make sure that everybody fully can identify these terms. So the standard that we're addressing is standard 6 expressions in equations 2, and you should be able to, like I said, identify the parts of an expression using math terms. So if given an expression, you should be able to identify each of the different parts within it. The first thing we're going to look at, so we have an example expression here. And we're going to start off by first labeling that this whole thing together, this whole piece, I'm going to draw a bracket, all together it has two terms, so you'll notice there's two terms, and there's an equal sign, and that equal sign tells us that this is actually going to be an equation, because an equation has an equal sign. Whereas this part right here is not an equation, this is an expression. So you should be able to identify, are you looking at an equation or are you looking at an expression? Or does your equation have an expression within it? And the number one thing you're looking at to be able to determine that is you're looking for this equal sign. And while we do this, we're going to be coloring a little bit, so you probably want to have some coloring tool out or a couple different colored pens or maybe a colored pencil. And so this equals 21. This is actually considered our solution. Now, the next thing that you need to know when we're dealing with expressions is here, and I'm going to draw an arrow right here and right here. You are looking at two different terms. So an expression is made up of two different terms. So if we kind of move backwards, an equation is made up of expressions, and expressions are made up of terms. And you know that the terms are separated, or how you know what the terms are is you look at what they're going to be separated by, and they're separated by this operation, and in this case it's separated by a plus sign. But it can also be separated by a minus sign as well, addition or subtraction. And this is going to be our operation. I'm just going to write that in really little. So it's separated by addition or subtraction operation. Now a term can also be something that's in parentheses. So if you had like parentheses x plus 2, that parentheses would also be a term. So that's another way that we can separate it. But in this case, we just have the two separated based upon the plus sign. Now the next thing we need to know is this right here, this number 7. This number 7 does not have a variable attached to it. And because it does not have a variable attached to it, we also call this the constant. It's not affected by a variable. It stays the same. No matter what we do and what value we put in for the variable of y, the expression will change, but that plus 7 will never change. 7 never changes because there's no variable attached to it. So we have that constant. The next thing we're going to look at is this term that we have over here, this 14y. This term is made up of two different features. the first feature that we have is this y. And in this term, this y is called the variable. It is the unknown. So I'm going to write this out here. This is the variable. So the term 14y has a variable, and then it also has a, and like I said, you don't have to color these the same way I'm coloring them. I'm just trying to identify the different parts, so I'm coloring them different colors. Just do the best you can with what supplies you have. But so I have this 14, and this 14 is connected to the variable. And because it is connected to the variable, we call this term the coefficient. So our coefficient is affected by whatever value the variable has. If the y represented 1, the coefficient would be the term would be 14 times 1. If the variable was 2, the term would be 14 times 2. The variable changes or can have any kind of value put in for it, but the coefficient is attached to it. It's that number prior to the variable that doesn't change. It changes only as you apply the variable.
So the y is the variable?
Correct. Yeah. So the coefficient and the variable. So terms are either going to be parentheses, they're going to be coefficients and variables connected, or they're going to be constants. So those are the three options you have for terms. So once again, if we kind of backtrack, an equation is made up of expressions. Expressions are made up of terms. Terms are either made up of parentheses, constants, or coefficients and variables. So those are the various different parts that you're going to find within an algebraic term or an algebraic equation. Okay, so moving on, a little bit of review. A variable is a letter only. It's just by itself a letter. So an example could be X, Y, Z. A coefficient is and I should have done that in red because I could have matched the variable up above. So why don't I mark this is the variable, so it's in the same color that I used up above. The coefficient in this case, I had it as green up above. And a coefficient is the number connected to the letter only. So up above, it was our number 14 because it was connected to that variable. And then our constant, I colored it purple. Our constant is just the plain number in an expression. So if you look up above, the 14 up here was the constant. The example was the X, or I'm sorry, it wasn't the X, it was the Y. And the plain number up above, what number was it? The constant in our example expression. What was the number, class?
7.
7, yeah. So that makes more sense. Alright, so now let's look at the next example and let's see if we can then make some identification. On 15t plus 6 plus 18y, we have various terms that are put together, different variables. The first question I have is this an expression or an equation? Raise your hand if you can tell me. Is that an expression or equation, Tanner?
It's an expression.
Why isn't it an expression?
Because there's no equal signs.
Yes, so this is an expression. In order to make it into a equation, we would have to put an equal sign. Okay, so then the next question I have is there a constant present up above? Is there, in that expression, does it have a term that would be considered a constant? Delaney?
The number 6.
The number 6, because it is
Plain number.
a plain number. So the number 6, we would write 6 is a constant. Do we have any terms up above? Terms. Understanding equations are made of expressions. Expressions are made up of terms. Brent, what do we have?
T and the Y?
Those are our variables. Before we break it down into variables and coefficients, how many terms do we have, Inessa? 3, because there's 3 different sections divided by the operation plus, right? So the first one would be our 15t. That's 1. Then we have that constant 6. And then we have our final 18y. There are 3 of them up above. Now we're going to separate those terms into constants and variables. So, or excuse me, coefficients and variables. So what would our coefficients be, Michael?
15T.
That is the term. I'm looking for just the coefficient within the term. Kaylin?
15 and 18.
15 and 18, right, because those are the numbers that are attached to our variables. Class, what are the variables?
T and Y.
T and Y. Good. Awesome. All right, we're going to go to page 97. On 97 is our practice paper. And so what I'd like you to do is I would like you to take a moment and I would like you to solve this. Pause the video. And when you're finished and you've done your test of yourself, I would like you to replay the video and see how you did. And I'm going to take a second because my first period is here while I'm recording this. I'm going to cover it up and I'm going to test them too. And I'm going to go fast. So, go. Okay, so I'm hoping that you pause the video and that you are ready to check whether you know the parts of an expression. Here we go. Beginning with, how many terms? There are 2. Correct. Next, what is the coefficient? 13. Awesome. Next, what is the variable? X. Perfect. And finally, what is the constant? 15. Well, my first period did a fantastic job, so it seems like they understand the different parts. And if you understand the parts, prove it by showing me you knew by coloring a very pretty border around your expression because you are a A+ student. All right. Have a fantastic day. Thank you very much.